favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you have enjoyed that segment. I like talking about good defenses and good defensive players, and this next guy is no different. He might just be the best middle linebacker in the league, the best play diagnoser in the league, one of the best readers of opposing offenses in the league. That is Fred Warner. Sadly, he plays for a rival, but no matter, because he truly deserves the praise he's getting. When I think about the 49ers defense especially, it's all about communication. It's all about knowing your role. And even though there are names being made in that defense, Nick Bosa certainly, Fred Warner's now getting his name out there. The two safeties getting their names out there as well. There are names in this defense. It certainly seems like a very selfless place. There's no more selfless player in the league, while also being so productive in the way he does it, than Fred Warner. And I believe that playing such an aggressive style of defense on a team that expects so much out of you can really take its toll, but he's really risen above each and every single challenge he's faced. So let's talk about Fred Warner and his fantasy stats. 843.3 fantasy points accrued over his fantasy career. Last year, 159.7 points. An astonishing number. 82 solo tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 5 QB hits, 11 passes defended, and to top it all off, we talked about Patrick Queen's astonishing run-stop win rate. Fred Warner does 7 better. Third in run-stop win rate, 43% run-stop win rate. And when I actually think about those two players, these two players that I've talked about, Patrick Queen and Fred Warner, the thing I think that separates them is that Fred Warner's mental foundation is something that cannot be taught. Supplanting himself at the middle linebacker position in a 4-3 defense where a lot is going on around him. You have Nick Bosa coming off the edge. You have so many good safeties. So many players can do so many good things. You need a solid core to hold it all together. That's what I think separates them. Patrick Queen, he had that one good season as the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens defense. But now he's going to be on a defense where he's not necessarily trusted. Fred Warner has always been trusted, and he knows that his defense is the best in the league, and that's what makes him so much better. That's what makes every single 49er defender better. They know they're the best in the league, and they know that each and every one of them can make positive plays happen. I think that the best thing I can say about Fred Warner is that he doesn't necessarily have to worry about stats too much. He processes the game so well, the game almost comes to him. Nick Bosa can get a couple sacks. Dre Greenlaw can affect the pass rush. They can have so much presence up front. Travarius Ward, Hufango, when they're healthy, they can get a lot of interceptions. But at the end of the day, the reason why Fred Warner is so trusted in this system is because, out of all of them, he's the center of how they think mentally. I think that the 49er defenders don't necessarily realize it, but they're intrinsically linked with how Fred Warner plays. When I think about great middle linebackers, let's take one of my favorites, Bobby Wagner, for example. They're always in and around the play. Most importantly, they're communicating different details for defense. They're communicating what plays are going on, run, pass. Most importantly, it's their actions that really spring defenses into action. Because once a middle linebacker makes a play, that really bolsters the whole defense, because they know that, hey, that's a brain right there. That's a guy who's really diagnosing plays. If he's getting into the game, then we can really bolster. A good middle linebacker bolsters a defense. Because if you don't have someone who's constantly diagnosing what happens within the game, your defense is not going anywhere. Now let's talk about what, if any, potential weaknesses Fred Warner might have. The only one I can think about is that he's in the best defense in the league. And I know it's kind of cliche to say that because of me saying that that's in his favor. It works in his favor. But right now, being in the best defense in the league certainly adds a ton of pressure. And the way the 49ers are structured is that in the 4-3 system, there's a lot going on in terms of pressuring the quarterback. And there's a lot that goes on then in the linebacking core. And Fred Warner, I feel like, is most comfortable kind of sitting in the middle of that defense at first, and then when the ball is snapped, going into action. He's not someone who is going to be aggressive. He picks and chooses his moments. And sometimes, that can affect how defenses play. I'm not saying it's indecision that's kind of holding back Fred Warner. I'm more looking at how reactionary his position requires him to be. I'm looking at how the 49ers really want to preach what their linebackers do. Because the linebackers for the 49ers, I feel like, are more an extension of their coverage than, say, pure blitzers. I think that Drake Greenlaw's fantastic from the weak side as a blitzer, but at the end of the day, I think of Fred Warner as someone who can stop the run because he stays put, stays grounded, but he's also a guy who can break up the pass. And I feel like the most important aspect of his game is that he also understands that his front four on any given day can get to the quarterback. So he's someone who is attuned so well to his front four, saying, oh, if it's a long pass, I have faith in my guys up front to get it. If it's a run, then I'll be in the middle of the play. But then again, the fact that the 49ers are so dominant at containing the quarterback, it also opens up a whole new landscape for Fred Warner. 5 QB hits and 3 sacks is something to go off of here. Because if your front four is generating pressure, that's when the linebackers smell blood. That's when, it creates a lot of opportunity. I don't necessarily think of the 49ers as a linebacker blitz. Because they're so dominant in front, they know there's an opportunity. And Fred Warner, well, as a middle linebacker, and, weak side linebackers are more likely to diagnose plays where they can blitz. Fred Warner, because he's so intuitive, can realize, hey, nobody's at the quarterback hit, let me go up there and help with the blitz. So, I hope I'm not confusing you too much in terms of how Fred Warner plays, because it's a very intriguing style. But it's certainly something where the flow of the game is dictated by how Fred Warner's reactions and actions kind of define what the 49ers defense does, if that makes sense. In terms of IDP, I really think Fred Warner's success can be sustained because he's always getting one stat or another. When you look at Fred Warner's stat lines, the reason there's so much balance is because he's the best linebacker in the league. A lot of people might be kind of skeptical about that because they want maybe one dominant area, but at the end of the day, like I always say, balance wins. You know, drafting a Micah Parsons or TJ Watt might make a lot of sense because they get a lot of stats, but do I want one guy who's dominant in one specific stat, like I say, or do I want a guy who can get me so many different stats? And it's the same at every single level of fantasy. The same kind of thing that you have to diagnose. Do you want a guy who's dominant but in one specific area, or do you want a guy who wears so many different hats? And that's what Fred Warner does. And he's the best at doing that, no less. At the end of the day, I can sit here and tell you that maybe Fred Warner is going to have a down year. Maybe, the 49ers defense is going to be more predicated on having Fred Warner sit back a little bit more. But be wary, because no matter how stationary or reactionary Fred Warner is going to be, just know that he makes plays and he makes them consistently. And that's what good middle linebackers do. Good middle linebackers realize, hey, I don't have to be completely dominant in one specific area for the entirety of a game. I can pick and choose my spots. And sometimes that goes further than a Micah Parsons or a TJ Watt. So please consider Fred Warner in terms of IDP, because you won't regret it. That will just about do it for this segment. Coming next, speaking of solid tacklers and solid linebackers, we are talking about one of the on-the-rise talents down in Duval in Jacksonville. We'll be right back to talk about him after the break.